Hello and welcome to a bonus episode of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Of course, I am your host, Rick Doherty. As I've mentioned a number of times in the last few months, I recently completed a pilgrimage on Ireland's National Famine Way to raise money and awareness in the fight against domestic violence. On the show today, Sarah Says is going to join me to talk about some parts of that trip that weren't necessarily spent on the trails. For those of you who love Disney content, I also thought that later in the episode, I would talk with Marissa from Chicago about a topic that I knew was very important to her. Marissa's absolute favorite Star Wars character is Obi-Wan Kenobi, so she'll join us to talk about the Disney Plus series that aired while I was in Ireland. I actually needed to catch up on that series when I got back from my pilgrimage. Right now, let's jump into it by welcoming Sarah Says. Thanks for being here, Sarah.
Yeah, thanks for having me back to talk about this really fun adventure you had.
So by this point, anybody who listens to the podcast or hangs out on the YouTube channel knows that I went on a pilgrimage to Ireland back in June. I walked Ireland's National Famine Way to raise money and awareness for CASA of Pinellas County, Florida in the fight against domestic violence. Quick plug, casapinellas.org/walkwithrick/ casapinellas.org/walkwithrick/ to donate. We would really appreciate it, but I'll talk more about that later. So I went to Ireland and I did this trip every Monday, starting August 1st and ending on Halloween, October 31st. You can go to the YouTube channel and you can see a vlog from my journeys in Ireland, literally only on the trail. So I thought it would be fun to sit here with Sarah and talk about what I did in Ireland that wasn't part of my pilgrimage, that wasn't on the trail. And maybe we'll talk a little bit about that as well, but you can get all that content. But this is a travel podcast. So I did travel in addition to doing the hiking. We just thought we'd talk about Ireland for a little bit and what I got to experience. I hear you have some questions for me, Sarah, so let's get started.
I do. I have lots of questions in my brain because as some people know, some people don't know, there was like no contact, very little contact that we chatted while you were in Ireland. So it was little updates here and there that I got from Courtney and your mom and things like that, and which is really cool. But, you know, we haven't really had a chance since you got back to sit down and really talk about your experience and where you were. And I mean, yeah, we saw the updates on Facebook, things like that, but it's not the same as chatting about it. So my first thing I was wondering, so where did you start on this journey? I know you flew in Southern Ireland, I believe, and then you flew out elsewhere. So where did you start? Where did you end? What are your big cities you were at?
Yeah, I will answer that question in just a second, but it is funny because when I talk to Sarah now, I specifically am not really talking about my trip to Ireland. Like, even after I got back, we'll talk about other things, but I haven't talked about it, so we would be able to have this content.
It has been a little bit.
And while I was there, I had an international phone, and I couldn't call or text Sarah, but I was able to, every once in a while, send her a message on Facebook Messenger, but that's not the same. You can't say stuff on Facebook Messenger. But anyway, so I flew into Dublin Airport in the Republic of Ireland, and I knew that I was going to want to, A, adjust to the time difference. So I was going to want my first couple days to be in the same place and not start hiking until I had adjusted to the time difference. But B, I didn't know how much time I was going to get to spend in Dublin. And obviously, even though it's not a huge city as far as a lot of cities in the United States, population-wise, it is certainly one of those international cities. It's a city where people travel, where you get a whole bunch of different types of people. You talk about Dublin, all around the world, people know what you mean. It was definitely a city I wanted to explore. So I made my first 3 nights staying in Dublin so I could get to do some sightseeing. I could adjust to the time difference. And I actually lucked into the coolest hotel. I stayed at the Harcourt Hotel, which is a few kilometers from the River Liffey. So basically in the downtown area, but south of the river. The Harcourt Hotel was the home of author George Bernard Shaw for a number of years. He actually lived in this hotel, the same hotel where I was staying, that I wasn't paying all that much money for, to be honest. I really lucked into whatever deal I got at this hotel. George Bernard Shaw, one of the greatest writers in the history of time, lived in this hotel. So that was something that was really cool. It was the first thing as I got off the bus that took me from the airport. The first thing I see is this hotel where I'm staying, and George Bernard Shaw lived there. So that was a really interesting way to start off this trip.
That's really awesome. And then from there, kind of where did you go? Like, did you go south? Did you go north? What other cities did you visit before you started the official pilgrimage? Were there any other cities you visited that were pretty cool, or did you, after Dublin, just kind of go to the starting point?
So I basically just spent those 3.5 days in Dublin before heading out to start the pilgrimage. But I did see some really incredible things while I was there. Got to experience some things that are actually part of Irish life that aren't even like tourist attractions. For example, the Rolling Donut. Now, I don't know if the Rolling Donut is all over Europe. I don't know. I know they're not in the United States, or I haven't seen them in the United States, but it's a donut shop. And it's called the Rolling Donut. And these donuts, first of all, they had a huge line of vegan options, because Dublin was very, very vegan and vegetarian friendly. The rest of Ireland, not so much. But the Rolling Donut had a lot of vegan options. They had, really good coffee. But it was just this cool little place that you could sit down and have that first breakfast in a foreign country, and it felt enough like, maybe like a Dunkin' Donuts or something, but it still had this different vibe, and it was really cool. So I had that. My hotel was really close to Grafton Street, which is a big tourist area where a lot of people do shopping. It was where they had the Dublin Disney store, which I got to visit. Right. Fly a quarter across the world to go to a Disney store when I lived 2 hours from Walt Disney World.
Closing them all down in the U.S. So you know what? To get to see one in Ireland, it's probably pretty cool.
Honestly, I was shocked that they had one. But I was able to walk around Grafton Street and see some of the tourist stuff. That's also right by St. Stephen's Green, which is sort of a mini Central Park, like much, much, much smaller than Central Park.
Okay.
But not only is it historically important because it is this park that has existed in Dublin for a long time, but it also played a big part in the Easter Rising, in the Revolution in 1916. They used the gazebo in the middle of this park to treat people who had been wounded in the fighting and things like that. There was a hotel across the street from it that was being occupied by British soldiers, and they had to overthrow it, and they still have the flag flying on top of the hotel, because they pushed them out. So I got to see a whole bunch of stuff like that. I got to see the GPO, which is important historically. I took the tour of that. I saw St. Patrick's Cathedral, although you do have to pay to go to St. Patrick's Cathedral, and it was already later in the evening when I was there, so I didn't actually go inside. I did Dublin Castle. The one tourist attraction in Dublin that I really didn't do, that everybody else in the world seems to do first thing, was the Temple Bar.
Oh, okay.
I had heard that it is kind of one of those experiences that has gotten too touristy, where it's almost a bad experience when you're there. So I didn't really seek it out, but I do know a lot of people who do like to visit it, and it just wasn't necessarily my jam. So I saw a ton of stuff in Dublin. I walked around for a long time. The Abbey Theatre is really historically important. Trinity College in
Mm-hmm.
Dublin, where George Bernard Shaw attended school, Oscar Wilde. I saw Oscar Wilde's old home. Definitely a lot of history. I'm more of a history person, so I wanted to see a lot of that stuff while I was there, and obviously Irish history because I am Irish. That was an important thing for me to see some of these things. So, loved Dublin. Honestly, I do think it is the coolest city I've ever been. I love Los Angeles. I know we have different opinions on Los Angeles, and we
Only
have
downtown.
different opinions of New York as well, but I
Yeah.
really love New York. I love Boston. Like, there are a lot of cities that I've visited. Washington D.C., I love to visit Washington D.C. But there was something about Dublin when you combine the history with this international flavor. It feels like, because it's the capital of Ireland and because it's also the biggest city, it is like Ireland's New York and Washington all kind of combined into one. The people there are so nice. I was so shocked by just how people there generally care about you. Like, they're not asking you questions so that they can springboard with what they want to say. They actually sit there and listen to the things you have to say, and it's almost hard to describe, but amazing people.
Yeah, I remember the few times that we got to talk, you mentioned like on the train that you met the older man, and was it like his granddaughter or somebody that you were riding with, and it was pretty hilarious, and she told you like don't believe like most of what he says or something. It was pretty funny. But it sounds like you've had a lot of good experiences with people there.
So when I left Dublin, I took the train from Dublin to Cork, and then I had to pick up a bus in Cork, and then I had to get a taxi, actually. That's how out of the way the start of the first trail was, that I had to do all of these things. It was like a Steve Martin, John Candy movie to get there. But I was on the train from Dublin to Cork, and the train had 4 seats, 2 and 2, where they would face each other. And at the window was a grandfather and his granddaughter. And then there was a woman who was sitting directly across from me who was from Brazil. And she actually works for Cadbury. And
Oh,
she
cool.
said she normally brings Cadbury eggs for people when she's traveling, but she was running late. And I will never forgive her for not having Cadbury eggs on the trip. But so the 4 of us didn't know each other. And we had just the greatest conversation over the 2-ish hours that it took to get from Dublin to Cork. The grandfather laughed like Johnny Rotten.
Oh my gosh.
But he was dressed like old school fancy, like he was wearing like a nice shirt jacket and a button-up shirt, and like he was dressed like he was trying to present himself fancy, but then he would just laugh, and it was like you were talking to Johnny Rotten. And his granddaughter, who was in their version of high school, so he went to use the restroom, and the woman from Cadbury and I were like, all right, like, are the stories he's telling true? And she said, about half of the stories that he tells are true, but luckily, he thinks all of them are true.
Oh, that's funny.
And
Oh
he
my
was
gosh.
just
Yeah.
so fun. And it was just getting this real aspect. Because if I just would have spent my entire trip in Dublin or in Dublin and on the trail, I wouldn't have gotten to meet these types of people. It's one of the reasons that I like to travel a little differently than some other people, is because I want to really find out what it's like in the area. And the woman who was from Cadbury, she was from Brazil. She just decided one day that she wanted to try something new. So she applied for jobs all over the world, and she moved
Wow.
to Dublin. And she was saying how much she absolutely loved it. And I didn't just learn more about Ireland from this trip, but I met people from Germany, the Czech Republic, South Africa, Brazil. I was meeting people from all over the world. You meet people from all over the world at Walt Disney World, but
Right.
everybody's in such a high-paced environment that you don't talk to anybody.
Right.
But when you're just sitting on a train with nothing to do and you have friendly people around, everybody starts to have these conversations. So, but yeah, that train trip was one of my favorite parts of the journey.
That's awesome, because one of my questions I had for you was about, like, your favorite parts. And I mean, it should be visiting Cork, because that's the land of my great grandparents. And it should be amazing and wonderful. But no, I'm just kidding.
So it's funny you should say that, because when we were on the train and we had said that we were going to Cork, the old man said, "Oh, there's nothing there but hillbillies." So
You know what? We're hillbillies in the US too. So at least when we came over, when they immigrated here, before they had my grandma, they did head to Montana. So, and that's where my dad's from. So, so we're just carrying our lineage all the way over from Cork, Ireland.
it's funny you should mention that, though, because when I was in Ireland, my Irish side went to Pennsylvania. And while the landscape in Ireland was more beautiful than anything I've seen landscape-wise anywhere else, except for maybe the Southwest, I do love Arizona and New Mexico and that stuff. But it was so beautiful, but parts of it did remind me, and I was like, okay, now I see why they went to Pennsylvania, because this is similar enough that you could kind of make that work. But yeah, so your family was like, well, we're kind of the hillbillies here in Ireland, so maybe we should do the same thing.
That's so funny. I never met these people. They all passed before I was born, even my grandmother, but I can only imagine.
I will continue this conversation with Sarah in 2 weeks on August 28th in another bonus episode of the podcast. You can also see brand new vlogs from my pilgrimage on Ireland's National Famine Way every Monday between now and Halloween, October 31st. The first vlog in that series aired on Monday, August the 1st. Please make sure to subscribe to the Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty YouTube channel to stay up to date on all of these videos. I literally taught myself a video editing program to be able to bring this content to you. On a related note, my pilgrimage on Ireland's National Famine Way this year was significant for another reason. 2022 is the 175th anniversary of Black 47, which was the worst year of the Great Potato Famine in Ireland. The town of Montbellew, which is about 50 kilometers from Strokestown, where I started the National Famine Way, is having a famine walk today to pay tribute to those who suffered and those who were forced to flee. While I wish I could be there to join them, I wanted to acknowledge their efforts to not let these people be forgotten. Many times we only preserve the histories of the rich. I'm in awe of the way the people of Ireland work tirelessly to also preserve the histories of the poor. Now, since I know you want at least a little bit of Disney talk, here's Marissa from Chicago. Thanks for joining us, Marissa.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, your favorite Star Wars character, bar none, is Obi-Wan Kenobi, and we wanted to spend a little bit of time here talking about the brand new Kenobi series on Disney+. We watched all 6 episodes, and we're just going to talk about it for a little bit. First of all, we're probably going to stay away from most major spoiler alerts, but there are going to be some things that if you've escaped getting the spoiler to this point, I just don't think you really care about the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. So we're not going to try too hard. So Marissa, first of all, having your favorite character brought to the screen in this way with this focused series, what were your initial thoughts?
Yeah, so I think it's pretty clear that I'm going to be very biased in this. I was so excited just from hearing about the series. And every little bit of detail we got leading up to it. And then watching it was just such an incredible experience. Being able to return to this character who, we all thought we'd seen all of his stories. We thought we already knew everything that went down with him. And it turns out there's all this stuff that we had no idea happened. And I know some people weren't fans, but that's Star Wars for you, I feel, in a nutshell. Very kind of controversial IP there. But I loved it. I really, really loved how they expanded on the character, expanded on the stories. I think it brought more depth to his character in a very meaningful way. And I think it ultimately added a lot more meaning to the original trilogy.
So when you said that you were biased going into this, I still didn't know what that was going to mean, because I didn't know if you were going to have such high expectations going into it for an Obi-Wan Kenobi series that you were inevitably going to be disappointed. But I'm really happy that you enjoyed it so much. I think some of the things that I liked were getting the chance to see in live action Obi-Wan finding out what happened to Anakin. And even some of the flashback scenes. Obviously, Hayden Christensen looks a lot older now than he did, so you had to suspend disbelief a little bit, but some of those scenes and sort of building on that relationship even more were just really powerful.
They were incredible. And I personally loved that Hayden Christensen came back. And I think he got a little bit of a redemption arc for himself, just to be able to say, like, hey, I can't act. It wasn't me. It was these silly lines I was forced to read. And he was able to give a lot more into this performance, which was really, really nice to see. And hopefully it keeps some people off his back, I hope.
I know that in 20 years, Daisy Ridley is going to be really excited about her series on Disney Plus that will give her the same arc when they're hating who's ever in the new movies. So one thing I was going to ask you about here is obviously the breakout star of the show is baby Leia, young Leia. This young actress just knocked this role out of the park. She was so Carrie Fisher like, and that's the only way I can describe it. What did you think of her performance?
Yeah, I mean, you said it. She really did such an amazing job of being Leia. I remember watching one of the episodes and just her mannerisms and the way she makes some of her faces. I was texting one of my friends and I was like, oh my gosh, it really looks like they cloned a little Leia, a little Carrie Fisher, and brought her onto the set. It's amazing. I really think Disney has found their Star Wars goldmine, and it's baby characters. Because you've got Baby Yoda just still crushing it. Everyone loves Baby Yoda, and now you bring in Baby Leia. Everyone's loving that. I mean, I'm waiting for the animated Baby Jabba the Hutt series to come out.
Everybody thought Grogu was the cutest thing in the Star Wars universe, and then baby Leia was like, hold my fuzzy tauntaun. So, and beyond just her being cute, because she was cute, like she really played that character well, and I was really, really impressed with it. Her chemistry with Ewan McGregor was really good. It was just done very, very well. There was a new character introduced into this show. I mean, there were many, but the major new character being the third sister. What were your thoughts? Very controversial. I don't feel there should have been controversy in this. I mean, I think we all kind of know why there was, but we'll just move on to talking about the character herself. What did you think?
Oh, I thought she was fabulous. I thought that was such a great addition to have this kind of morally gray hunter character. So it's not just, you're not going back to just being Vader versus Obi-Wan. You've got this other angle in here now that enables you to kind of grow the story and show more things. And it also is a much more realistic plot device, because if you have a story of just Vader and Obi-Wan, I mean, there's a limit to how many times you can match them up on screen throughout the series. And I really do think that the Obi-Wan series struck gold with that. They really, really did the perfect amount where you see them fight and it's not just them. But the addition of Reva, the third sister, you get more conflict. It's more intense. You get scenes where she's hunting them down and she's so close. And you're watching it and I mean, I'm watching it and I'm like, okay, obviously I know these characters survive. I've seen them in later things, but it's still so intense when you're watching it. And I think she was fabulous. I think the actress did a fabulous job. The only criticism I have is that I would have liked to see more, truthfully.
It went by so fast. This should have been more than 6 episodes. Like, it really, really did go by so fast. I was just going to address, I don't think this is a controversy, but an interpretation that some people had. And that was about when Leia asked Obi-Wan if he was her real father. And Obi-Wan said, "No, but I wish I was." Now, there are all these theories going around on the internet that was him saying that he actually had a thing for Padme. I did not get that at all. I think that is a very, very weird interpretation of that moment.
Yeah, I totally agree. I didn't even consider that until I saw people saying that on social media. It just genuinely never crossed my mind. I just took it as, there's this sweet little kid that he's bonded with, who he, obviously has this really great connection with, and he was close with both her parents, and just wanting that kind of familial connection with someone that he doesn't have with anyone. I mean, he's living alone in the desert, and he will be living alone in the desert for many, many, many more years. So, yeah, I didn't think anything of it. And then I was like, oh, people are taking it this way? All right. All right.
So I think what you're hearing from the two of us is, if you maybe heard some bad things on the internet about the Obi-Wan Kenobi series and you didn't know if you wanted to watch it, give it a try. It's 6 episodes. It's pretty short. You can binge it in a day or two on the weekend while you're doing your chores. And I definitely think it is worth it. Thank you so much for being here again, Marissa.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
This upcoming Thursday, August 18th, we will have a brand new episode of the podcast where Marissa will be back to talk about the newest theme park being built over at Universal Orlando Resort Epic Universe. We're going to go in depth into what we know and even speculate on some rumors. In 2 weeks, on Sunday, August 28th, Sarah says we'll finish asking me questions about my recent trip to Ireland in another bonus episode. Please consider donating to Casa of Pinellas County, Florida, in honor of my pilgrimage on Ireland's National Famine Way by going to casapinellas.org/walkwithrick/. That's CASAPINELLAS.org/walkwithrick/. Talk to you again on Thursday. Until then, have a great week.